Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. Today it's time for the long-awaited KV-5 review, Russian Tier 8 Premium Heavy Tank. Now, probably the first thing we need to talk about when we're talking about the KV-5 is how the hell do you go about getting your hands on one of these beasts? Well, it's not as easy as you might think. A lot of the premium tanks you can just go straight to the tech tree, and here we go. Look at the Russians. You've got the T127, the Valentine, Matilda, Churchill, SU-122 and the IS-6. And if you have the gold in your account, you can just click the button and bang, there you go, tank in your garage. KV-5 is not on the research tree. You can't buy it like that. It used to be, but for some bizarre reason, and I really have no idea why, they pulled it from the tech tree and they made it that you could only buy this thing in the gift shop in your World of Tanks web portal. But worse than that, they made it only available during special occasions and for limited times, exactly like the Type 59. And I really don't know why, because this thing did not sell very well at all. It was probably the poorest selling premium Tier 8 that there was. Hardly anybody had them. And the reason people didn't really buy KV-5s, it wasn't because it's a bad tank. It's not. It's not a great tank, but there are some great things about it. But it's a very, very difficult tank to master. There are certain tanks in the game that pretty much anybody can drive and do reasonably well in. KV-5 is not one of those tanks. Driving the KV-5 is an exercise in managing your weak spots, because weak spots in this tank are many and huge and easy to hit, and are the death of KV-5 drivers over and over and over. Learning how to manage the enemy team's access to shooting at those weak spots is what turns a competent KV-5 driver into a great KV-5 driver. I am not a great KV-5 driver. I know what I should be doing, I'm just not very good at doing it. But we'll come on to that later. Let's have a look at the actual tank itself. As far as hit points go, it's very, very well catered for. 1,780 hit points. That is 380 more than the IS-3, which is a bit of a beast of a tank. In fact, even if you look at the Germans, and the legendary Tiger II, that only has 1,600. So it's certainly got the ability to take some hits. Now, this is a big tank, and I don't think you appreciate just how big this thing is. Let's compare it to some of the other Tier 10 heavies, like the IS-4 or the IS-7. It's a massive tank, and it weighs more than both of them. This thing weighs 100 tons. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are only two tanks in the game that weigh more than this, and that's the E-100 and the Mouse, and those are just massive monolithic slabs of German steel. And they don't weigh that much more than the KV-5. E-100 clocks in at 130 tons. This is 100 tons of tank. And it does have a very, very powerful engine. 1,200 horsepower engine. Unfortunately, it's a 1,200 horsepower engine pushing 100 tons of Russian steel around. So while it can do 40 kilometers per hour, you're never going to see that kind of speed unless you get yourself at the top of a hill and you manage to charge down the hill. Then it will reach that 40 kilometers per hour very, very quickly. And that allows you to exploit one of the things that this tank is incredibly good at, and that's ramming. If this thing, I have just died to so many KV-5s who managed to get on higher ground than me and charge down the hill before I could get away, and they just don't even need to bother firing. They'll do 600 damage just by driving into you. Yeah, 600 damage easily, no problem. It's 100 tons of tank charging you at 40 kilometers per hour. It's not going to end well for you. In fact, there are probably only two tanks in the game that really don't need to be afraid of KV-5s ramming them at speed, and that would be the E-100 and the Mouse, because they're heavier than the KV-5 and they have thicker armour. But for just about every other tank on the battlefield, never, ever, 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 ever get yourself at the bottom of a hill while there's a KV-5 facing you at the top of it. Because if the KV-5 driver is even slightly competent, and let's face it, most people who've had KV-5s have had them for a while and they know what they're doing, you're going to get crushed, son. Get out of the way, because he will not show you any mercy. Now, that 40 km per hour downhill is, I mean, you're going to see 25 to 30 kph at the most when driving on off-road terrain on the flat. It's a 1200 horsepower engine, but it is pushing 100 tons of tank, so don't expect masses of mobility. That's not what this thing's about. And that kind of extends to the traverse speed as well, which is very, very poor. It's only 18 degrees per second. But then we come to the armour, and that's one of the other outstanding features of this tank. It is ridiculously well armoured for a Tier 8 heavy. Turret and hull, same all around, both 180mm thick at the front. And the front is sloped. It is very well sloped. It's kind of square and boxy, but sloped at the front nevertheless. Front of the turret also 180mm thick, and the turret cheeks are very well angled. The sides, turret and hull, 150mm thick. Just to put this into perspective for you, okay, 150mm of side armour, that's like strapping 3 T-28 prototypes to the side of your tank. That's how thickly armoured the sides of this thing are. And the rear is incredibly well armoured, 140mm rear turret and rear hull. There are other heavy tanks in the game that wish they had that armour at the front, never mind the rear. So as far as armour goes, and while it is very, very boxy, it is nevertheless very, very thick armour. And it doesn't take a massive amount of angling to render armour of that thickness pretty much impenetrable. Now, the view range is not bad, 350 metres. The signal range is pretty shit, 440 metre signal range. It only has a Tier 7 radio. So that's, well, it's not the kind of problem that people are going to have foremost in their mind when they're driving one of these tanks, but you will find yourself dropping out of signal range and not being able to see friendly tanks on the map when you're driving this thing. Not a huge problem, but it exists. You need to be aware of it. Then we come on to the gun, and this is disappointing. The gun's not very good at all. There it is, 107mm ZIS-6M. And it's pretty much the same gun that the T150 gets, just modified version of it. And the T150 is a Tier 6 heavy tank. It only has 167mm of penetration. The rate of fire is not bad, 7 rounds per minute. It will do 300 damage on a hit, which is all right. But, you know, the KV-1S gets a gun that will do 390 damage on a hit. The IS gets pretty much the same gun. The BL9 gun on the IS-3. You know, this thing is not about alpha damage. Unfortunately, it's not really about sustained DPM either, because the accuracy is 0.43, which is bloody awful, and it has almost 3 seconds of aiming time. I've got to be honest, this gun is shit. It's very, very poor gun, but it can be made to work. It's not absolutely terrible, and you're going to find, and this is kind of common to a lot of the Tier 8 premiums, is that they're outstanding in many respects, but it's usually not the gun. The German Tier 8 heavy, the Löwe, is probably, well, there's no question about it, it's got the best gun of the lot, but it doesn't have very good armour, and it's very, very slow. Most of the other premiums, certainly at Tier 8, their guns are distinctly underwhelming. The Type 59's gun is alright, the Super Pershing's gun is kind of crap. The KV-5's gun is kind of crap, and it's for this reason that you will see a lot of Super Pershing and KV-5 drivers carrying a few rounds of gold ammo, because the penetration with gold goes up to 219, which is still pretty shit. There are Tier 6 heavies, and I'm looking at you, the French, who have guns with that much penetration without gold. But you really, I don't have a problem with KV-5 drivers firing gold ammo, or saving a couple of rounds of gold ammo for those special occasions when they get into the Tier 9 games and they're trying to penetrate E75s. But this gun would even have problems penetrating an E75 from the front with gold ammo, if the E75 is well angled. So the gun is definitely not the strong point of this tank. However, you can and do kill tanks with this gun. And it's all down to positioning and getting close enough that you can hit weak spots, if weak spots are all you can actually penetrate. But getting close is half the battle. Getting close enough to put this gun to work, because this is not a long-range machine. Definitely not. This is a brawling heavy tank, but it's a brawling heavy tank with some massive weaknesses, and those weaknesses are this machine gun turret here, affectionately referred to as R2-D2, this vision turret here, the commander's hatch, or commander's machine gun port up here, and the commander's hatch here, with the prize going to this thing here, the R2-D2 machine gun turret at the front, because it is just such an obvious target. And everything, absolutely everything that faces this thing in battle is going to be able to penetrate that. And so driving the KV-5 successfully is all down to managing the exposure time of these weak spots, denying the enemy the chance to shoot at these things, because if you give them a chance to shoot you in these weak spots, they're going to shoot you in these weak spots, because this thing is so incredibly well armoured everywhere else. And there are a number of ways that you can do that, and one of them, believe it or not, is to drive around backwards, because you've got 140mm of armour at the rear, and there are other heavy tanks in the game that wish they had that much armour at the front. Now this is tricky, and it's very, very risky, because that's where your engine is. And the very, very first time I tried this, I drove around a corner backwards into a T-34, and he put one shot into that and set my engine on fire. And I mean the T-34 Tier 8 Premium heavy tank, not the Tier 5 medium. So if you're in a Tier 8 maximum game, as you will be most of the time you're driving a KV-5, driving around backwards with the gun pointing over the back of the tank is actually not a stupid thing to do. As long as you don't run into, Tiger 2s or T-34s that can penetrate your rear armour, because that will give you problems. One of the other things that you can do, and this is very easy, driving backwards is not as easy as it sounds. It is difficult to master. I am crap at it. You need a lot of practice, because it's totally counterintuitive. Your controls are reversed, your gun's pointing the wrong way, and you can get yourself into trouble. It requires a lot of practice, and you'll tend to see noob KV-5 drivers who are still trying to master this thing, like me, getting themselves into lots of trouble driving this thing around backwards and just not being able to manoeuvre the tank the way you would expect them to. It's because they haven't learned how to drive this thing with the controls reversed. Stick with it though, and it will pay dividends. Now, one of the other things you can do is it's pretty simple, and it's just literally just keep driving backwards and forwards. If you're facing off against an enemy tank and you're waiting to reload, or you're trying to close the distance on him, and you know he's about to fire, don't give him a straight shot at these things, because even though they don't have much armour on them, they're very, very well rounded, and you do actually have to hit them square on in order to penetrate. If you manage to con somebody into firing slightly to the left, slightly to the right, there's every chance that shot's just going to bounce off. So when you know they're going to fire, don't sit still. Don't drive in a predictable way. Stop, reverse, jink backwards and forwards, and you will bounce shot after shot off these weak spots if you just do something as simple as that. And the third and final technique that you're going to need to learn in order to keep these weak spots covered up is sidescraping. A lot of you probably already know what sidescraping is, and I have a fantastic example of it later on in some of the replays. But just for the sake of being complete, sidescraping involves driving up to, for example, there's a building here, and there's the corner of the building, and the enemy tanks are down the road on the other side of the building. What sidescraping involves is driving up to that corner and then reversing away from the corner at that sort of angle. So that, if you can imagine, the corner of the building is here, and there's the building's wall. All that they can shoot at is the side of the tank, and this half of your gun turret. this big old weak spot here is covered up by the building that you're just poking the side of the tank around. And that's 140 millimeters thick, and it's sloped back at a 30-degree angle. They're never going to penetrate it. They might blow your tracks off, but big deal. You weren't going anywhere anyway. And it allows you to point that gun around the corner at them while keeping this and that covered up behind the corner. Might be difficult for you to visualize, but I've got an example of that in the replay. Now then, crew skills. It's a heavy tank. It's a tier 8 heavy tank. Repairs. I have gone with clutch braking on the driver, purely and simply because it has such god-awful traverse speed. Everybody else, I've gone with repairs. You cannot go wrong with repairs on a heavy tank as your first crew skill. As far as equipment slots go, well, gun rammer is just about obligatory. The reload speed isn't that bad. It gets 7 rounds per minute, but more is always better because you're going to be missing with so many of these shots until you manage to close this thing to close range. Other equipment, well, I don't have a lot of cash on me at the moment. I bought a gun rammer recently, and that cost a lot. What else would I fit on one of these things? This is probably one of the few tanks in the game where I have spare... Oh, actually, I don't have spare camouflage nets, but I wouldn't put a camouflage net on this thing in the first place. The aiming time of that gun is horrific. Vertical stabilizer is expensive, but helps a lot. Similarly, also a enhanced gun lane drive, but the vertical stabilizer, you get more benefit than an enhanced gun lane drive. It's definitely not a bad idea to fit one of those things. Improved ventilation is also a good idea on this thing, because that is going to improve things like the loading time, the aiming time, all that good stuff. It'll help the driver with the clutch braking and the traverse speed. In fact, I would probably go for improved ventilation before vertical stabilizer or an enhanced gun lane drive. Anything else? Well, toolbox, yeah, not a bad idea. Because of the way you have to drive this thing, you're going to get your tracks blown off a lot. And toolbox will just help you get those tracks back up faster, rather than having to waste a repair kit. And that's pretty much it for the garage review. It's time you saw how poorly I play this tank, and then we'll show you somebody who actually knows what he's doing. So, first replay, and this is the first game I ever played in my brand new KV-5, and it was an utter disaster. And I'm trying to be clever and failing miserably. We've got a Jag Panther 2 up here, who's not bad, plays a decent enough game. This was a horrific loss, by the way. My win rate on this machine is 29%. And I'd like to blame it on the teams, but no. It's mostly been down to me. Gun depression on this tank, something I didn't mention in the garage, is absolutely bloody awful. And now here is, I'm just going to pause it here. Now I can see, this is just stupid. I can see, the IS I'm not that worried about. The T-34, I can see he's there. I know he's got a really, really big gun. And I'm trying to be clever and reverse an angle around the corner to keep my R2-D2 machine gun turret covered up. But he's a T-34, and he's got a really, really big gun, and he doesn't care that this is 140 millimeters of angled armor. And it's just me trying to be too clever and paying the price. There you go. 426 damage and sets my engine on fire. And I ain't going to penetrate a T-34 at 258 meters with this gun. So the lesson you take away from this one is, don't be fucking stupid, Jingles. And there you go. And I can't even get the gun down and pointed at these guys around the corner at this angle anyway, because the gun depression is so bad. So trying to do something that was stupid in the first place, and even if it hadn't been stupid, was never going to work because I don't have the gun depression while parked on the side of this hill. So that was me failing miserably in my very, very first KV-5 game, and just being embarrassingly bad. And that's pretty much been my problem with the KV-5. And I must stress that this is my problem with the KV-5. It is not a bad tank. Played well by somebody competent, i.e. not me, this is a really good machine. It has some amazing strengths, but it has some rather bloody large weaknesses as well. The weak spots on the front and the gun not being very good, combined with really bad gun depression, are significant weaknesses of this machine, but played well, you can compensate for those weaknesses, and people do exceptionally well in the KV-5, and I'm sure that with more practice I will be able to do well in this machine. I do like it, I'm just not very good at driving it. I know what it is I should be doing, but I don't have enough experience driving the tank yet to A, be able to do what it is I know I should be doing, and pick the right moment, B, to do the things that you need to do to drive this tank well. This is probably the best game I've ever had in the KV-5, and it's not that good a game, although it's the most kills in one game I ever had in this tank. I ended up with 4 kills, and they weren't very good kills either. But I'm kind of improving, even though this isn't particularly good. Now, just as a point of interest, did you see the speed this thing got up to when it was coming down that hill? I was doing 50 kilometers per hour at one point, and that's 100 tons of tank. This thing just crushes anything it collides with when it's going at a speed like that. But the gun is a definite weakness. 167mm of penetration with 0.43 accuracy. Now, you get preferential matchmaking in this thing, like a lot of the Tier 8 premiums do. You will only ever get into Tier 8 or 9 games. Now, that's a KV-4, and look at the cursor, trying to find a weak spot, and the only places at the front of this thing I can penetrate are his driver's hatch and his machine gun port, and those are targets that are about a foot wide and they're 200 meters away. And this gun has 0.43 accuracy. There is no way I am going to hit, penetrate and damage this guy unless I switch to HE. However, the good news is I have not been spotted. I'm in some good cover here. But I'm kind of in danger of getting outflanked. But then again, the team are beating off the attack that's coming up, and this is about as far forward as the enemy team ever get. So I decide, okay, there's a tiger over there, a tiger I can have, and I go for it. And you can build up a decent bit of speed. Unfortunately, there's the aiming time and accuracy of this gun lets me down when I could have killed that 361H. The KV-4's heading off down the beach, so, okay. I need to charge across here, and I've come a bit of a cropper here. Take one hit in the flank from an SU-12 244. I need to keep going. I know how fast he can fire. I need to keep moving. And I don't make it not fast enough. So, I'm just going to pause it here and use the free camera. That second shot from the SU-12 244 blew my tracks off, and I know how fast that guy can reload. And my repair skills, because this is one of the first games I played, are shit. And if I wait for the tracks to repair normally, he will just put another shot into me, and he'll keep me pinned here, and I can't see him, I can't return fire, and I'll just die. So I had to use a repair kit there in order to get my flank clear and around this corner where I can put the front of my armour up against this Tiger and 4502 that are waiting around the corner. So I had to use a repair kit, didn't have a choice. Unfortunately, that gets me into trouble. Okay. Despite using a repair kit and instantly moving up again, that SU-122 managed to hit me in the tracks again, and now he's pinned me in position in the worst possible spot. I'm safe from him unless he moves, but now I'm coming up over this ridge, and I no longer have the gun depression to defend myself against this 4502A and Tiger. I'm also immobile, and I can't move to protect my weak spots. So these two guys should have killed me. Luckily, they weren't very good. Also luckily, if you see, I cannot get my gun down any lower than that. But it turns out that that's just as low as I needed to get the gun. Because I managed to penetrate his commander's cupola. Now, I don't know why this guy did not come around and just start unloading it at my flank. And I managed to... And there you go, track's blown off. Again, that's the Tiger. but my gun is low enough now that I can actually start defending myself, as long as these guys stay where they are. And they're pummeling shots into these weak spots on the front of the tank. And the Tiger manages to get himself below my gun depression. And then I get my tracks back up. I'm going to pause it here and just look at where they're shooting. Actually, you can't see it there, so I'll move forward slightly. Bang. You can see where they're hitting, right? And they're trying to penetrate there. All the shots, that's where they're aiming for. And you know, competent, even vaguely competent players know exactly where to shoot the KV-5. So it's no surprise that that is exactly where they're aiming. And I'm just lucky they haven't actually managed to aim well enough to penetrate with most of the shots they fired at it. And it's pure luck. Luck on my behalf and lack of skill or experience on their behalf. Okay, the 4502 now doesn't have any friends. And I don't know why this guy didn't go around me, but I ain't going to complain. Checking my flanks are clear. If I can just... There. That's this gun for you. I just bounced off the lower glacis of the 4502A. And he finally manages to get one penetrating shot into that machine gun turret. And I'm trying to use... There we go, Hummel takes him out. I'm trying to use the dead Tiger as cover. Keeping an eye open on the flanks, and here we go. There's artillery. Of course I don't kill him. He fires and hits me. Kills my radio operator. And what the hell was that? 60 damage from the side? Well, I finished the Hummel off. Oh, look, there's that guy we couldn't kill earlier. At that range, you can, however, hit weak spots. And that one went right through his machine gun port. So it was brave of him to have a go. But unfortunately, I think he was only using high explosive ammo. So, too little too late. And somehow I've managed to get 3 kills. But everything that's left on the enemy team, except for their M5 Stuart, can now kill me in one shot. So I need to be a little bit more cautious. And I haven't been playing especially well at all here. This has been a distinctly average game. I've had my share of bad luck, but I'm not blaming bad luck on this crappy performance. This is me, there you go, not watching where I'm going, driving into rocks. This is me just not being very good at driving a KV-5. Now, looking at what they have left, and looking at this, there they are, 2 Tiger 2s. I don't know where the M5 Stuart is. And they're coming back now, because they've seen what's going on down here. We've got a T-71 down there, standing his ground against 2 Tier 8 heavy tanks. He's a braver man than I am. So I'm going to sit here in the cap circle and just, you know, I want to be able to get shots into their flanks as they come up and around this side to get me. And that'll be the 4502 ahead. Yep, there he is. Moving that fast. Now, and I'm looking around back here for this M5 Stuart, and I have not spotted him there. I could have killed this guy so easily. Type 59 is like, he's behind you, you moron. God, do I have to do everything? And I'm like, what? Who? The Type 59. Now, bear in mind, I never actually fire a shot here, and look at how slowly this turret turns. So the Type 59, as far as those 2 heavies are concerned, the Type 59 is the only tank around here. That M5 never saw me, and I never fired, so I didn't give my position away. Now this Type 59, he played a good game, and he gets very, very unlucky here. He goes and he plants a shot in the 4502, and leaves him on 9 health, and the 4502 returns fire and kills him. But then our Tiger, from over there, kills the 4502, which allows me to finally hit something with his gun and get the killing blow on the Tiger 2. And the Tiger 2 with 5 kills, he didn't deserve that result. His team let him down badly. And that was the best game I ever played in the KV-5, and it wasn't that good at all. In fact, it was pretty poor, and it was only because we had a better team that we won. That win was nothing to do with me. But I must stress that this is not a bad tank. This is just me being bad at driving it. And I have not mastered the skills that I need to be able to do well in this tank. Luckily, there are lots of other people out there who have mastered the skills that they need to do well in this tank. And I'm going to show you one of them. So I think we can all pretty much agree that I really suck at driving a KV-5. But here's somebody who does not suck at driving a KV-5. This is Burning Tear. And you're going to see him demonstrate pretty much all of the techniques that you need to master in order to be successful with a KV-5. Unfortunately, his team is largely just a massive bag of fail. And there's one of the failures right there. That's D-Drazen in a Super Pershing. This is a Tier 8 maximum game. He's in a Super Pershing, and he's complaining that he doesn't like the balance, and he's quitting. Oh, yeah, failure of epic proportions there. Sadly for the team, we have another Super Pershing, and we have no idea how good this guy is because he never manages to connect. So, straight away, two of the top tier tanks, very, very powerful top tier tanks, just not getting involved in the game at all. So, and the rest of the team doesn't do that well, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to see Burning Tear here doing all of the techniques that I've tried and failed to master, or just never had the opportunity to put into practice when I've been driving my KV-5. You're going to see him side-scraping. You're going to see him wiggling the hull to deny shots at the weak spot. You're going to see him attacking backwards with the gun firing back over the engine block of the tank to deny the enemy shots at the weak spots. And driving the KV-5 successfully is all about weak spot management. It's about denying the enemy chances to fire at that machine gun turret at the front. That's how you win when you're driving a KV-5. So his first shot at an AMX, which hits, penetrates, fails to do any damage. He takes a quick peek around this corner just to see if there's anything big and nasty waiting. And now we're going to see the first thing he tries to do. Well, he doesn't try to do it, he does it quite successfully. He just runs into the wrong enemy. And this is a problem. I mean, the KV-5 is very, very well armoured from every angle, and driving around like this is not actually a bad idea. Providing you come across the right kind of enemy tank. There's not that much in this game that can give him problems if he presents his rear to them, angled very well, like that. But as luck would have it, that's one of them. Now, he needs to get out of here. And that's pretty much exactly what he tries to do. He keeps... This is the trick. It's very, very tricky driving your tank backwards, especially when you reverse the view angle like this. So now what he's trying to do, he's trying to angle himself again to go side-scraping. And he's just too slow. Bang, takes a hit there. So he's taken 2 hits from a T-34, but now he's got himself turned around, he knows what he's facing, and now he's going to go side-scraping. Now the side armour of the KV-5 is very, very, very good, and angled like that, all this T-34 is going to be capable of doing is blowing his tracks off. He's got the building blocking off any shots at his major weak spots. The T-34 can only hit his tracks. That's side-scraping. You need to learn how to do this if you're going to be successful at driving a T-34, if you're going to be successful at driving a KV-5. And now he's spotted his teammate, he's gone around the other side, and he's going to come up. Catch these guys between the two of them. He's going to wait for that T-34 to fire before he makes his move, and while he's waiting he's jiggling backwards and forwards, making it more difficult for him to hit the weak spot. There he fires, he missed, now go for it. KV-5 weighs 100 tons, and he's going to come around this corner at 34 kilometers per hour. This is what we call ramming speed. And he can still build up a decent bit of speed here. Double ram. All it did was cost him his tracks. Laughing his ass off in chat there, and so he should. Team's losing, of course. Now that other Super Pershing driver has actually loaded into the game now, and he's not moved. He's still sitting in the cap circle, so he's probably quit as well. Unfortunately for Burning Tear, this was a great game for him, but there's only so much you can do when the odds are stacked against you like this, you know, with a team like this. There were a couple of decent players on the team, but the majority were just utter fail. Not helped, of course, by the fact that two of the best tanks on the team took no part in the game whatsoever. Oh no, one of them has actually started moving now. Too little, too late, of course. And here comes a Type 59. So fire, boom, blows his tracks off. Ramming speed. Triple ram. Seriously, any opportunity you get to ram with this tank, take it. You weigh 100 tons. There are not many tanks in the game that are going to be able to shrug off ramming damage from this thing. Now that is a T-28 prototype who's fired and bounced. Burning Tear switched to HE, and he's angling and he's jiggling, but there's a T-34 going around this guy. His gun's pointing the other way. HE loaded, and he's just doing little bits of damage. And he's going after him now. T-28 prototype has clearly spotted that T-34. He knows he's being attacked from two directions. 300 damage. Is that the big... That doesn't necessarily... That might not be the big gun. That might just be the 105mm. Ooh, 411 damage. Actually, that might be the big gun. Personally, I would have switched to his gold ammo at this point. Only fires again, and this time it bounces. And again, you see him jiggling backwards and forwards. T-28 prototype driver is aiming for his machine gun turret. Don't give him the opportunity. He's timing his reload. He knows he's going to be pointing the gun at him. He's jiggling backwards and forwards. Move, move, move. Get that rock between you. He's switched back to armor piercing now because he's on his flank. And the sides of the T-28 prototype are only 50mm thick. This guy's doomed. Got him. And unfortunately, this is where he comes to a sticky end, because that is a 4502A. And he tries to angle, but he penetrates and kills him anyway. However, even though it wasn't a win, in fact it was a pretty horrific loss, largely due to a mostly incompetent team, what you saw in that video was Burning Tear using every possible combination of tactic, trick and technique to get the most out of this tank. When he had to face an enemy, he didn't sit still while he was aiming and reloading and just giving them shots at that machine gun turret. He jigged backwards and forwards just to reduce the chance they were going to hit. Don't forget, while that machine gun turret and the smaller turret next to it are weak spots, they're very, very, very rounded. And if you don't hit them square on, there's a very good chance the shot will bounce. It will just ricochet off the rounded sides. So don't sit still if somebody's pointing their gun at you and they have a shot at these weak spots. Do what Burning Tear did. Keep moving backwards and forwards while you reload the gun, while you wait to aim. Driving around backwards can and does work. Especially against tanks that are lower tier than you, because the rear of this tank is incredibly well armoured, and it's probably the most difficult skill to learn, because you're driving around backwards. It's counterintuitive. You're not facing the way you used to be facing, and your controls are reversed. But if you get good at it, you can have very, very, very good results with this tank. And thirdly, you saw him side-scraping on the corner against that T-34. Sides of this tank are also incredibly tough and well armoured. And by side-scraping around the corner of a building, you can keep those machine gun turrets covered up by the building you're side-scraping around and only show the front of your turret, which is very well armoured, or the side of the tank at such a steep angle that the only shot they're going to get is into the tracks. And then, big deal. You're in the optimal position anyway. You don't have to move. And so that was a very, very good example of how to do well. Certainly did the best he could in that game in the KV-5. And that pretty much brings this little review of yet another premium tank to a close. I hope you learned something. I certainly learned a lot from watching other people's replays. And I do like this tank. It has a lot of potential. Again, it's one of those machines that you're probably going to want to carry some premium ammo on, because it'll never get into a tier 10 game, but you can get into tier 9 games on this machine, and you're going to want to be carrying some premium ammo in those sort of situations, because the gun isn't actually that good, but it's an absolute beast of a ramming machine. 100 tons, and it can get up to 34 kilometers per hour when charging downhill, and there are not many tanks in the game that are going to come off better than you in a head-on collision if you're driving one of these things at them. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.